Over half of respondents name illegal migration as a priority concern in the EU. Emergency rescue operations have finished in Kyiv after a Russian missile strike, Ukraine's emergency services reported.
Farmers gather again in Brussels to protest against European laws despite some flexibility shown.
According to an exclusive Euronews and Ipsos poll, 59% of respondents said illegal migration is one of their top priorities. Illegal migration came fourth place in a list of pressing issues behind inflation and economic growth. For those answering the poll, migration was more important than climate change, European defence, or the protection of minorities. According to Andrew Yedes, director of the Migration Policy Centre, negative perceptions of migrants in Europe has increased after the pandemic.
In 2015, we saw very high levels of public concern that fell off during the pandemic quite significantly, and now we see it rising again. So I think these perceptions are really important. Clearly, there are issues objectively occurring, but this subjective perception drives this salience.
The Netherlands, Germany and Portugal are the countries where most people think the fight against illegal migration should be a top priority. In all of them, the far-right parties are on the rise.
A significant thing is the presence of radical right political parties, Wilde in the Netherlands, Alternative for Deutschland in Germany and Chega in Portugal, political parties which have politicised the migration issue and I think have been driving or contributing to public concern about the issue.
At the same time, the EU policy on the topic is sharply criticised. 51% of the respondents consider it negative, while only 16% positive. 71% of EU citizens believe the EU should strengthen border controls, while only 28% are in favour of a policy welcoming immigrants in the name of humane values.
I think fundamentally it boils down to people wanting to see a system that works, to see that there is a system and that it functions and that member states can agree with each other. But what they see instead is member states disagreeing with each other about what the policy should be, continual disputes about migration.
According to Yedes, the migration debate will drive campaigns in the upcoming EU elections as member states disagree on policy platforms.
Ukrainian officials stated that the Ukrainian strike on the occupied Sevastopol in Crimea on the night of the 23rd of March targeted more Black Sea Fleet ships and caused more damage. In addition to the large landing ships Yamal and Azov, Kyiv claims it has also struck the reconnaissance ship Ivan Hurs and the large landing ship Kostiantin Olshansky. Now, Kostiantin Olshansky was part of Ukraine's naval fleet until 2014. It was one of many Ukrainian ships seized by Russian forces during the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014. Navy spokesperson Dmytro Platenchuk said damage to the vessel was still being determined, but specified that it is not, quote, combat capable. Ukraine's defense ministry said, quote, Russia planned to use the ship against Ukraine. Therefore, Ukraine struck Kostiantin Olshansky with the Ukrainian-made Neptune missile. Few days before the weekend attack, the UK Defence Ministry assessed that the Russian Navy had already likely resorted to limiting its operations to the eastern Black Sea to, quote, preserve the fleet as its losses mount.
Turkish authorities have detained 40 suspected Islamic State militants following the terror attack on Moscow City Hall on Friday, which killed at least 137 people. More than 2,900 people have been arrested in Turkey on suspicion of belonging to the jihadist group since the 1st of June 2023. After the attack in Moscow, Italy joined France in raising its alert level against terrorist attacks for Holy Week. Italy was already on high alert following the October 7th attacks by Hamas in Israel. On Monday in Venice, security protocols were triggered when 2 bags were found in the street, but their owners ended up arriving before the bomb squad. As the terrorism threat looms large, especially in Europe, France will tighten its security in the lead up to the Paris Olympic Games in the summer. According to President Emmanuel Macron, Islamic State has already made several failed attempts at attacks on French soil, with 2 attacks prevented already just this year. Terrorist threat levels remain high in Germany, with Berlin on high alert ahead of the European Football Championships in less than 3 months' time. Spain's National Security Council, in its latest anti-terrorism report, warned the EU faces direct risk of violent Islamic extremism as the wars in Gaza and Ukraine continue.
German Vice-Chancellor and Minister of Economy and Climate, Robert Habeck, warned that Europe must ramp up defence spending during a global conversation with Euronews.
Man hat nicht gesehen oder man wollte es nicht sehen, was Putin treibt, wie stark dort seine Armeen aufbaut. Ich möchte nicht gerne Geld für Armeen und Rüstung ausgeben. Ich kann mir das besser vorstellen für Bildung, für Forschung, für Weiterbildung, für Klimaschutz, für Nachhaltigkeitskriterien. Aber wir müssen es tun. Die Zeit, wo man es nicht möchte, ist vorbei. Deswegen müssen wir die Militärausgaben erhöhen, um uns schützen zu können, auch eine eigene europäische Schutzgarantie geben zu können, nicht nur die Amerikaner als Garant sehen, sondern wir müssen da selber wehrfähiger werden. Und das fällt mir nicht leicht zu sagen. Die Rüstungsausgaben sind in den letzten 2 Jahren gestiegen, weil wir die Ukraine so stark unterstützt haben. Sie müssen meiner Ansicht nach aber verstetigt werden, auch für, man muss ja schon fast sagen, die Instandsetzung der europäischen und jedenfalls der deutschen Armee, um ein bisschen was zu können.
A volcano in the Icelandic town of Grindavik erupted on Monday against the colourful backdrop of the Aurora Borealis. Also known as the Northern Lights, the phenomenon is common in the Scandinavian country from September to April. Locals were evacuated in November when the Svartsengi volcanic system awakened after almost 800 years of laying dormant. The volcano has erupted 4 times since the first bellow of magma blew in December.
There has been an outpouring of support for Real Madrid player Vinicius Jr. in Spain after he broke down in tears at a press conference while discussing racist abuse. Vinicius Jr. has been the target of verbal abuse on several occasions since joining the club in 2018. The player said he would not leave the Spanish league, but that more and more he was losing the desire to play.
One, two, three.
Federal Chancellor Olaf Scholz joined Economics Minister Robert Habeck and other German politicians to symbolically open a battery factory in the town of Heide. Scholz had previously emphasized the strategic importance of investments such as the Northvolt battery factory for Germany and Europe. 3,000 jobs would be created directly at Northvolt, with another 10,000 expected in the vicinity of the factory. The construction is a beacon example of how the environmentally and climate-friendly conversion of value chains is possible.
State-affiliated Chinese actors were involved in 2 cyber attacks in the United Kingdom, according to the country's Deputy Prime Minister. Oliver Dowden confirmed Chinese involvement during a speech in the UK Parliament.
I can confirm today that Chinese state-affiliated actors were responsible for 2 malicious cyber campaigns targeting both our democratic institutions and parliamentarians. A number of our international partners, including the United States, will be issuing similar statements to expose this activity and to hold China to account for the ongoing patterns of hostile activity targeting our collective democracies.
Earlier, former British Conservative Party leader Sir Ian Duncan Smith urged the government to label China a threat rather than a challenge. Responding to the reports, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said countries should base their claims on evidence rather than smear others with factual basis.
Farmers made their way to Brussels on Tuesday to make their rage heard. But this time, less people and less tractors gathered near the EU institutions where the Agriculture Minister meeting took place. Farmers are protesting against free trade agreements, new environmental rules, and the administrative burden linked to subsidies.
Voor de idiote regels van Europa en tegen de natuurherstelwet. Wij zijn één met de natuur, wij zijn niet tegen de natuur. Hè? De media zetten boeren op tegen de natuur, maar dat is niet waar. Hè?
Protests from previous months meant farmers met with both the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and with several EU agriculture ministers. A few weeks ago, the Commission gave in to some demands. It loosened some environmental conditions around crop rotation, as well as reducing red tape. But for the farmers, it's still not enough.
C'est toujours nécessaire parce qu'en fait, on a eu certaines annonces, mais concrètement, là encore, on manque de solutions. Donc il y a eu des annonces sur certains sujets, mais pas sur les sujets de fond qui sont les plus importants, donc c'est-à-dire le revenu, les accords internationaux, des choses comme ça. Là-dessus, on manque encore vraiment de solutions.
The new and more flexible rules will benefit small farms. Those with less than 10 hectares will not be subject to controls and penalties related to conditionality.